For the past few months, I've been doing videos where I add changes to the X-Men movies to improve them, as well as iron out any continuity problems that popped up in the almost 20 years of films. I thought it would be fun to also try to include a live-action X-Men television series, Legion, starring Dan Stevens, which started in 2017, near the end of the reign of the X-Men movieverse. I never saw this series before I started working on these videos, and even now I've only seen the first season. Legion in the comics was Professor Xavier's son, and he's not a character I am all that invested in. He's been the lead in his own book before, but I think he usually works better as an antagonist. But I was absolutely floored by this season. I haven't seen seasons 2 or 3, but right now this is one of my favorite shows in recent memory. Top 5 TV series of all time for me. It's Twin Peaks weird, but it's also got hints of Wes Anderson to it, with how everything sort of stylistically looks like it kind of belongs in the 1960s. There's a silent movie-esque They Live homage in an episode. Dan Stevens said, this is like if Stanley Kubrick made the Pixar movie Inside Out. And yeah, I think that's a spot-on description. Even when you know next to nothing about some of the characters, the actors all bring their roles to life, and I constantly find myself wanting more. I'm angry at my past self for not bothering with this show when it first started coming out. I really couldn't tell you why I never gave it a shot, but I'm here to tell you it is a fantastic series and you should watch it. Now that I've suggested you watch this show, spoiler warning from here on out. As far as what I've been doing with these videos, even the movies I liked, I've offered some changes, sometimes a lot of changes, but I don't have anything to say that could be done differently with this show. Other than the main character, David, and the main villain of the series, I don't think any of these guys are characters from the comics, and I am totally fine with that. I can't think of any character I would want to see from the comics in this show, except maybe Professor Xavier, but just in a cameo. At least that's what I was thinking before I really got into this series. Now that I've seen the first season and I love it so much, I think any ideas I have for this world would only make this show worse. But I still want to say that this could be part of my imagined fixverse for the X-Men movies pretty easily. While they do allude to David's father being a telepath who battled the Shadow King, they don't actually mention Xavier by name in the first season. Maybe they do later on, but for the first season, they keep it pretty vague. Keeps it new reader friendly to non-comic book readers, and even people who are into the X-Men movies but aren't sure what's going on there, they could come into this series pretty fresh and enjoy it. In the comics, David isn't adopted, but Xavier was absent for pretty much all of his life, and while I think the way the TV show does it works pretty well, I do wonder if maybe it would have been a little better if they did it just a little closer to the comics in this one instance. Maybe when I see the later seasons I'll change my tune, but only knowing what happens in season 1, it seems Xavier battled the Shadow King, believed he defeated the Shadow King, then gave his infant son up for adoption, and then the Shadow King possessed David for years, planning to use him as revenge against Xavier. I don't want to make it sound like I'm nitpicking, because in some ways, what I'm doing here is like watching the first third of a movie and stopping and asking questions. But I do find it strange that Xavier abandons his son and never checks up on him again, even if he believes the threat of the Shadow King is gone. So I'm 100% admitting that my ideas are inferior to what this show is able to do. But if I was doing things, trying to fit it in my X-Men movieverse while not making it a huge part of that world, I would say Xavier did not know he had a son. The Shadow King still had a battle with Xavier before David was born, and Xavier believes that he defeated the Shadow King. But there was just a tiny sliver of him left, and he somehow found David and found out he is a much more powerful mutant than Xavier. And I wouldn't want to put an actual date on the series, as the mixture of different time periods makes this timeless in the same way that Batman the Animated Series is, and I like that a lot. But since the Shadow King's whole motivation, at least in season 1, seems to be getting revenge on Xavier and then possibly taking over the world, this series would take place sometime during the events of the original trilogy, but the only thing that would really indicate that is that Xavier is still alive out there and the Shadow King wants to kill him. Everything I've seen in this series so far would happen exactly the same if you made this minuscule change. You could do an Xavier cameo showing the Shadow King stuff and make it clear this is sometime before Xavier got the school off the ground to make David's age in the show work with what I've already done in his timeline. But since all of season 1 works so well without any other X-Men connections, I'm not even sure if you would need to do an Xavier cameo, at least not in this season. But what you could do that would be pretty radical would be let series runner Noah Hawley direct a prequel movie showing Xavier meeting and defeating the Shadow King. I have no idea what that would even be like, but it would be the most mind-bending movie of all time, and I would love it. And instead of Xavier putting his son up for adoption and then saying, "Peace, I'm out," you could say Xavier had an affair with David's mom, who was already married with a kid, who would be David's older sister from the series. Xavier is often portrayed as a bit of a hound with the ladies, so this would be pretty in character, I think. Then, when the affair is discovered, Mrs. Haller decides she's going to try to make it work with her husband, and they raise David as if he was Mr. Haller's. Xavier never knows that he has a son. This also makes Xavier slightly less despicable if he never had any contact with Mrs. Haller after she broke things off, and he doesn't know that he has a kid. A prequel movie like this would obviously have to have more than just a psychic battle and an extramarital affair. Maybe you could have Shadow King be responsible for Juggernaut somehow instead of a magical demon like in the comics. Since I hinted at Kane in my X-Men Origins Magneto video, this this would maybe be the best place to bring him in. But something like this sounds like the best movie that will never get made. And while you have television spin-offs of movies like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you don't see many film spin-offs of television shows. Sex and the City and Twin Peaks, those are the only ones I could think of. And if HAWLEY was using the same design for the Shadow King that this series uses, you could 100% look back and say, oh, you've got James McAvoy in this Young Xavier movie, and it's got stuff from Legion, so that show is part of all these X-Men movies that have been going on forever. And yes, this would be breaking my rules I've set for myself. Normally, I only alter what's there instead of creating something brand new, like X-Men Origins Gambit or something like that. But I wanted to talk about Legion and how I would place it in this hypothetical X-Men universe I've been making videos on, and since I didn't believe the first season warranted any changes, I felt this was the best way to do it. And that's what I would want to see happen. Literally change nothing about this show except for a tiny bit about David's backstory, and give Noah Hawley $1 zillion to do an Xavier vs. Shadow King movie using the young Xavier we established in my X-Men Origins Magneto video. It would be great, you would all love it, and that's all I have for today. Next week, I'll be back in the movies with a hurtful film, and if you have seen this series and you hate my idea, at least tell everyone who hasn't seen this series to stop what they're doing and go watch it, because it is fantastic. But if you did like this video, be sure to stop a total stranger on the street and show them this video. They will definitely thank you for it, and they won't run away screaming. Also, pound that like button. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.